Goedemiddag. Good afternoon.
Hallo.
Hallo. Ons gaan nou begin met 'n gesprek. We are going to have what I believe will be a riveting discussion about the color of wine and transformation in the wine industry. The documentaries and films I like most are films that change your perception of reality once you've seen it. And if you've seen The Color of Wine, you can't really look at wine the same way. If you haven't seen it, it was shown at the festival yesterday, but it is also now on Showmax. So whether you've seen this documentary or not, you'll find the discussion interesting. And after this discussion, you will also find the documentary a whole lot more interesting than just watching it the first time. So I'm going to introduce you to the panel. I'm Danie Marais. This is Erna Blancquaert, Dr. Erna Blancquaert. She is the first black student to get a PhD in viticulture in the country, right, in 2015. She's also seen in the documentary The Color of Wine, and she was also a consultant to the team who worked on the film. This documentary is also available in book form as The Color of Wine. Then next to her is Dumisani Mathonsi. He's one of the 4 black pioneering winemakers featured in The Color of Wine. He currently works for Zonnebloem. And of course, we're all having wine as we're having this discussion. On the far left is Dr. Sifiso Ntombela. He studied with Erna, and he now consults for the Minister of DAF, so that's the Department of Agriculture and Forestry, and he's an agricultural economist very much involved with transformation. So we're going to talk about the wine as a symbol, but also the wine industry as one of the things that where transformation or the story of South Africa is very much evident. Okay, so let's start with the documentary. Erna, how did you feel the day after you filmed?
Well, I actually just walked off the set and I bumped into Nseki, they were busy doing a makeup, and we just had a conversation about one of Nseki's proteges who was actually struggling as well at that time. And when I was driving home from Franschhoek, I felt so troubled. And the following morning, I phoned one of my friends who's also featured in the documentary, Nati Mansongo, and I asked her, Nati, were you able to sleep last night? And she said no. So I couldn't sleep for at least 3 days after the filming of the documentary. And I was asking myself, of course, why? And of course, it's because of all the intricacies with this topic. Yeah.
Was there something particular when you thought back, like this was a question that really kind of riled me up, or was it just a whole lot of memories of a really tough time as a student?
I think it's just a combination of everything. Over the past 4 years, at that time, even a bit longer for me, still being at Stellenbosch University, and just seeing the students that are currently in my lecture room who's also going through similar challenges. But things have changed a little bit since I've been a student, of course.
Yeah, and you were a later generation student again to Dumisani. You started in 2005. Dumisani, maybe you can just share how you got into wine for those who haven't seen the documentary.
Hi, everyone. Just answering your question, how I got into wine. Finishing school at the age of 17 in deep KZN and not knowing and not sure what you really wanted to do, and an opportunity to come to Stellenbosch to study wine. It was just an amazing opportunity that I thought, why not? Go to Stellenbosch, go to the Western Cape, and learn how to grow grapes and make wine. I thought it was just be that easy. I didn't know there was going to be so much involved emotionally and then politically as well. I just thought, I was only 17. I wasn't actually thinking there would be even more that I was going to discover in Stellenbosch. Yeah.
I just want to check, is everybody able to hear the participants well? Okay. So Dumisani, in other words, you're very excited, you get a bursary, you think, right, there's an institution waiting for you to start your new life, but then you find out you are an alien. Is that more or less accurate?
I think you put it in the right way. Because, I mean, when I was at school, I was not promised, but I was alluded actually think you're actually getting a bursary, because if you come in that kind of background, the only way to the university is if you do well, number one. Number two is if you get a chance to get a bursary, because obviously how are you going to afford it? So I was under impression that I got actually a bursary to go study, only to find when I go to Stellenbosch that actually there wasn't actually a bursary, but there was a way to get me in, and then I can always apply when I'm inside. So when I got to register and to start applying for bursaries, that's actually when everything started to say, actually, you know what, it's not as easy as I thought. I thought I had it covered, but actually it wasn't actually covered. So the struggle actually started there, applying for bursaries, and actually the funding and the living in Stellenbosch, and the cost of living in Stellenbosch is not cheap. The accommodation and just to be in that part of the country is totally different ball game from where I came from. So it was a struggle in the beginning and until later in my studying, in my student times. Yes.
Sifiso, so you've only now recently seen the documentary, yes. And it very much deals with the kind of issues that you are dealing with in your work as an agricultural economist. How did you like the documentary?
Thanks, Daniel. Yes, I think when... Is this audible? Yeah. Sure. And maybe I must start by saying thanks for coming here. I think this is a different environment. You are actually used to be talking to politicians, so usually you're giving 3 seconds, so I'm going to try to be longer than that. But I think there are a couple of things when you look at the documentary itself. Having myself been exposed to that environment, must I put it closer like this? Now it's so close to where I put my glass of wine. But so there's two things basically that you pick up from that documentary. The first thing, of course, it evokes those emotions, but it also at the same time showed that how far the country has progressed in trying to integrate some of the previously disadvantaged individuals and expose them to different things. So basically, what it then tells you to say, we have progressed enough, but yet we are so far. So that's the first thing. And you can tell that the young people have conquered some of the things and how we are trying to find each other in the society that has been discriminated for some time. So basically, wine become a very good symbol of saying you can actually be united and can be the industry that can provide a lot of opportunities to different people of our society. So that's the first thing you see. The second thing I see, then I ask myself to say, I'm looking at Erna, I'm looking at Mathonsi, and all these other great, even Prof. Teron is there in the group. And then I ask to say, the industry and the country have all this quality of people, especially the university part, have created these gems that are actually now in the industry and hovering around us. What are we actually doing with them to turn them into the productive use so that it can take the industry into the better place that you want? So I guess what I'm saying is now when I look back and then I said, fine, the documentary shows that they are now educated, they are sharing their stories, they're emotional, but what's next with them? And what is it that they're then doing to ensure the next generation doesn't share the sobering story like they are sharing in the movie? And I think that's what keeps me at the end of the story of the movie, having more questions, but also having to realize that we are actually still having a more challenge that are facing us than it is. But it is a good start, and I think it is a awakening movie that everybody, I will encourage those that haven't seen it to actually look at it and see how far we're progressing. And it's frog-lipping, but I think it's going to the right direction, and it's a movie that everybody should see, all kind of society should see and say, the next generation shouldn't be faced with such kind of circumstances.
Yeah, I think what you see very well in the documentary is that wine is very much a symbol of sophistication, the elite. It's still very much a white boys club, not in terms only of the people who make it and enjoy it, but also the places where it's produced. And what's very interesting about the documentary is it's also the story of 4 first-generation students and what they have to struggle and to endure to succeed. But Nsiki Biela, who's one of the the stars of the documentary, says after she graduated, she felt like she had climbed Table Mountain. And there's some great photos with her grandma. But then afterwards, you see that you haven't actually conquered the mountain. There are 3-4 more mountains to follow. And I think maybe that's something to talk about, because then after that, there was a struggle to find work. And then if you look at Carmen Stevens, who's also in the film, I think she's still very, very frustrated with the way she's treated as a black woman who's a winemaker. Would you like to say something about your experiences and also maybe as a lecturer?
Well, in Stellenbosch, like I mentioned before, it's still very challenging. About 60% of our class are female, the rest are all males. And it's also challenging for those females, irrespective of their race. For me, it was extremely challenging, and it still is. I'm not, I still operate in the industry, but I'm more on the research side. So I do get treated differently. My research proposals do get treated differently. I don't necessarily get all the research funds because my name is first on the application. But maybe if somebody else's name is first, then we do get the funding. And if I'm part of the bigger project team, then I get the green light. So those are some of the challenges that I experience from a research perspective. Also, automatically you are connected with, there's a connotation that your research isn't good enough, that the quality of your students won't be good enough. Your master students, your PhD students, you get questioned all the time. It's a continuous process.
So you feel like you have to keep on proving yourself after you've already proved yourself?
Yes, it's a non-stop process. It's almost like you have to always have a plan B, C, D, E, just in case, because you know someone is going to question something that you did.
Dumisani, how's that been for you? One of the other things I wanted to ask you is the organizer of the Soweto Wine Festival talks about a black customer who comes in to buy wine, and he says it's for his wife. And he says he knows it's actually for himself, but a black man drinking wine is a bit of a sissy. Do you think that connotation is still true?
Yeah, I read actually that part, and there are people who still think that wine is for sissies, and those are part of the stereotypes that we have to get rid of in our society, that wine is associated with the elitists. Just like talking about Stellenbosch, the people who own the farms, the winemakers, the kind of people that actually work with the product and grow the vines. It is a very specialized drink, and it is made in that way, and it's marketed that way, and it is associated in most parts with the elite and the upper middle class and the rich. So, yeah, I think the beer industry did very well to get males to drink beer and nothing else but beer and the spirits. So if you drink wine, I'm pretty sure he wasn't lying when he said he will go undercover and say it's actually buy for his wife. Yeah, I think that's as far as you can get.
So in terms of marketing, there's a challenge if you want to break into new markets. But how was in the documentary you finish your studies and then you think like, well, I don't know where I'm going to work. I actually have no. You almost want to give up and go back to university, right? So how did that work for you? How did you actually then get into the job market?
Okay, getting to the job market was very challenging. Starting off as a student, your fellow students or the people that you meet in the campus, they ask you, so you're studying winemaking, so where are you going to work? It was a constantly asked question, and you ask yourself exactly where am I going to work? And the guys would make a joke and say, probably the government is going to get you a farm and you're going to have your own farm and make your own wine. I'm like, I don't think we're coming that far just yet. So it was a big challenge. The question is to where you're going to get experience and exposure to really what you want to do. So one of the things that actually helped me when I was in second year getting introduced to growing grapes and making wine, I went to my lectures and said, listen, you're mentioning terms here that I see on the book what they mean, but I actually need to I need to go on the shop floor and actually go and see what I'm talking about. And she said, no, I can help you. So she helped me get to the closest farms next to the campus to go and do some kind of an internship, to actually go there and start seeing how it's like to work in those vineyards and how to grow grapes and how to plant vineyards into the cellar. So that actually helped me a lot too, because once you get in, you start to meet people that are already in the industry. You start to make friends, and you start to have people that you can relate to and to call. You start making those networking opportunities. So that's actually what's very important for students. Don't just go there and study for 4 years. Go in, study for the first year, second year, start getting to connection as to the farms and the people that you want to be, that are in the industry involved in what you actually want to do. So that's actually how I went about it. And that actually helped me, because once you start applying for work, and then you can put your references, your lectures, number one. Number two, you can put a name of a farmer or a winemaker that you've actually worked with, that they can actually call and ask, does he have a potential? Does he have what it takes? Does he have the passion, or does he have the attitude to work in those environments? And he says, no, I think give him a chance. So I think that goes a very long way.
Yeah, so that's the difficulty of getting a foot in the door. Sifiso, from a policy side, you said what this documentary says to you is we have to make sure that another generations of students do not have the same bad experiences. What do you think is happening on a policy side? What do you think needs to happen in order for black winemakers not to just be able to make wines on white-owned farms, but to actually start owning the land as well? How is that going to happen?
That's a very interesting one. I hope I'm not going to be making career-limiting statements. But can I just put it in the historical perspective, trying to answer your question? So, big part of my work and my life, I spend it because I work in the council that basically trying to find government and business to agree, at the same time trying to please labor unions. So big time of my life, I spend my life trying to get to those guys. And I usually say, because I'm usually the youngest in the room, I can make statement that makes them uncomfortable. So I'll try to do the same thing here. So one of the things, just not the wine industry itself, but all these other industries, and not just in agriculture, but in the economy itself. The biggest thing that we're failing, and I'm hoping that the young guys can actually tackle it directly, is the issue of trust and honesty. And I'm going to get to it, what I mean by that. So if you look at the wine industry, it was a white boys club up until 1996. Deregulated the market, and everybody, we had a lot of fly-by-nights and exporters and all those things, which not only affected the black guys that were trying to get in, but the old guys that were there in the industry got burnt out. And then there started to be an order somewhere around the early 20s and so forth. So where the issue of trust happens is, you actually find out that the white farmers or the white owners of land and everyone, they they realize the need of changing, but they don't know how to do it. The black guys on the other side, we are all saying, look, we've been told, let's go to school, things will change. But you realize the education used to be a key, but someone came and changed the locks. So what needs to be done, I think for me, we need to have a lot of these kind of discussion where we become frankly honest. One of the things, for example, if I can make it out now, from the private sector side, I usually say private sector side, I'm just implying the owners of land and everybody there. The first thing is, we got to change the attitude to say wine is a luxurious commodity. That's not true. We just have to develop the local market. I was overseas a couple of months, and one of the guys I was with, he was tasting some wine, and he liked the wine, so he talked to the restaurant manager at the time, and he said, how do I get this thing to South Africa? And the manager said, where? And then he said, no, to South Africa, I want to import it. And the guy said, no, man, we have enough guys that actually drink this commodity. We don't have enough.
So if you're planning to
South
watch
Africa is.
Knuckle City...
So what I'm trying to say is,
Remember,
if
it's
you look
starting at
across
2, so
everywhere
you
in the
need to
world,
make your way
most
to
of the industries
Rotunda
are based on the consumption,
towards
local consumption of their
Knuckle
market.
City starting at
And we gotta
2.
stop thinking wine
And then
is a
after
commodity
that,
that you drink
at
in
4,
Camps Bay. We gotta take wine
we'll have a
and take it to Soweto.
question and answer
But when you
session
get to
with
Soweto or to
the
Kukuletu,
crew.
don't then come and say it's a
And then
wine
at
that is
5,
made
you
by
can watch
Erna, it's a
Rageltjie de
black
Beer,
wine
5
from-
uur
because
vanmiddag.
I'm not
Rageltjie de
interested in
Beer.
understanding if it's a
En net
black wine
daarna
or not.
natuurlijk ook 'n
I'm
vraag en
actually
antwoord
interested
sessie.
if
En
it's
dan
a wine,
vanaand
it's a quality wine, and
om
can I
8
drink
uur
it, it's a value for my money.
Poppy
So
Nongena.
let's not
Vanaand om
use
8 uur
certain ways
Poppy
to
Nongena.
demean the
Onthou dat jy
consumers. Consumers are not
asseblief moet
interested in
aanhou
that.
stem
So
vir
that's
die
the first
films.
part of it from the private sector side.
Please
And when you're trying
remember
to
to
open up the
vote on
opportunities,
our app
don't do it for a
for
cameraman.
whichever
do it 'cause
films
it's
you
a right
think
thing
are
to be
best
part
in each of the
the
categories.
citizens, so that you ensure this country
So next
forward
up is
is
Knuckle
actually
City
safe
at
both in
Rotunda,
terms of
and it's
risk
starting at 2.
and
So
the
please
stability of it. So that's the
make
first
your
part
way
from the
there
private sector.
if
And I think
you
they can change that
are
attitude.
planning to
The young
watch.
guys are doing it. The old guys, they're finding it difficult to do it. Now, I want to come to government side now. There's two things. So, Dumisani has been in the industry for some time. Erna has been in the industry for some time. But this dude can't even afford to buy one, even if you can have the one in the industry. He's not credit worthy. So when you're looking at all these wine farmers that are there in our days, in the 1950s, they used to have what they call it a credit board. So every guy could just go and get land and get those 50 hectares of land. We stopped that thing. So if we can bring it back, that's a thing that will actually help the guys to get into the market and understand it properly and do it for their own thing. But now, while you put such kind of policies, you get taken to court on a daily basis by these NGOs. So that's where I'm talking about to say, we tend to preach certain things, but when we actually have to get together and do it, we start to having interior motives that block that progress. And that alls for me, in my own little mind, it boils down to say, the trust issue is not there because not everyone wants to do it for the right reasons. And that's what we have to get with it first thing, and so that everybody can work from the same table and go forward. And I think that's the thing that we have to do.
Yeah, that's a tall order, I think, the trust issue. Is there anybody else here in the audience who'd like to pose a question already? Somebody who's seen the documentary? Anybody who has a question about where we're going with the wine industry? Oh, okay. Not yet? Well, if we look at the question of credit and the trust issue, one of the very interesting forward-thinking projects in the winelands, I think, was Solom's Delta. And you know, where you had the Harvest Festival and there was shareholdership for a lot of the farm workers. And financially, in the end, it didn't work. What do you think was done wrong there? What should one do differently? If you are, let's say you are a farm owner and you do want to do the right thing, how do you go about that? What do you?
I think a very recent example is Bosman Adama. They're situated in Wellington. A similar model like Solomstalter, where the workers have shares. I actually visited them yesterday for a research project, and I had the opportunity to be with some of the workers while they're busy grafting. And they just launched a new wine brand, which is also one of the key players there is Praisy Dlamini, who was also a student at Elsenburg. She worked at Distel, and she was a Cape Winemakers Guild protege. And Praisy is now heading that initiative where they want to try and get out new wines, and which is also a black-owned wine brand. Coming to the point of black-owned wine brands, there's at least just under 70 black-owned wine brands, 69 if I remember correctly, and about 61 black-owned wine farms. And if you think in terms of, like Sifiso mentioned earlier, there's always this connotation that it's made by a black winemaker, but in essence it's about the quality and whether the consumer likes it. And that people sort of get this tag also when you travel abroad. I recently spent some time in Austria, and there's a South African wine bar in the center in Vienna. And I asked them, do you have any black-owned wine brands? And they said, not really, because they also believe in quality. It's all about the quality. And great wine is made in the vineyard. That's why I love being in the vineyard, because and then the winemakers, they mess it up in the cellar. So, yeah, I think it's a different model, and I think it's everybody's responsibility in South Africa to make a contribution. And once we've had that, get that figured out, the different roles, it can actually be we can make a success of it.
What do you think, Dumisani? You're working for Zonnebloem. That's part of the Stel. It's a huge corporate. Do you sometimes feel like I just want to break out and go it on my own?
Being part of the corporate and actually working for, well, I work for a very high-end quality estate wines, and quality is, you can't substitute for quality. So you need to get stuck in there and learn the skills, and you can only learn the skills if you actually go down there and actually get experience and actually learn and keep educating yourself. So when it comes to wines, and Erna is correct, they will only import quality. Quality is what is important to the consumer. Who made the wine is not really what they want to hear. They want a great glass of wine, and that's what they want to taste. So what I'm trying to say is we need the skills, we need our education to be in that level to actually produce graduates that can actually think outside the box and be entrepreneurs and want to get involved into the growing of grapes and actually production of wine. That's going to have the vision and the wisdom to take the South African wines to the rest of the world. Not just because South African wines are nice things to have, but just because I think we've earned our place in the global market. The quality is there, and we need to just educate and share experiences and share knowledge and try and bring the guys that have the potential to actually. There are people who want to be involved in the industry. The people who want to own brands. There's people who've got different ideas. I'm meeting up with a lot of people who say, "Dumi, when are you coming up with your own project and let's do this?" I'm like, you're coming up with a different perspective. You've got a different background, whether it's business or marketing. I have a background of knowing when to pick the grapes and how to make the wine, and I'm honing those skills. And then we need to actually make. It can't be just one man's show. We need each other. We need to grow each other. We need to work for each other and work with each other, with one another, and take this thing forward. The whole documentary was a good start to actually talk about what had happened back then. Now we need to take it forward and say, what do we do now? Where to now? And I actually think, as Sifiso said, it was a very good start. And there's more. There's going to be more to come. There's going to be more documentaries after that one. That I can assure you.
I think we've had the conversation now about equality, and then of course there's the main land issue. But how lucrative is wine really? Because that was one of the things that the documentary talks about what happens after the corporations. That whole KWV system was shut down, and suddenly I think from like 11 million liters of wine that were exported in the 90s, it went up to 400 million. But is there money to be made in the local market? So sometimes I have the impression that if you're a really big South African billionaire, you buy a wine farm because that's like the ultimate status symbol. That's like the Mercedes of Mercedeses. Is there any truth to that, or like, is there real money in wine? Is there as much money as status in wine?
There is money, of course. That's the reason why they're still there. Yeah. So. There's a good professor of mine at Stellenbosch, Prof. Frank. He used to say, so the wine industry guys made so much money in the early 80s and the early 90s that they decided to build all these big houses just to annoy their own wives in the farms themselves. But just to give you practical numbers. So if you compare between, now from the land issue side, if you compare between the typical horticultural industry, including wine, you need about R1 million per hectare. And for you to survive on that farm, you need about 58 hectares. So you're looking at about 58 million rand just to get in. And to maintain that thing, you need another about 40 million rand. So you need about 100
What,
million
58 millions to start having
Just-
like your own...
Just to start having your own farm, and you are a small guy in this mix. But in that 58 million rand that you'll be having, you'll be harvesting for another, 18 years or 19 years? And you are harvesting about 100 million per annum on that. So there's definitely a lot of money. It's one of the very lucrative industries. It's doing very well, especially. It's correlated also with the hospitality industry. And we know our hospitality industry in the country has been growing very well. So it's a huge market. I mean, agriculture sector is worth about 134 billion now. And after oranges, which is worth about 10 billion, wine is the third one. It's about 14 billion a year. So it's a very lucrative industry. And the thing is, it's not about whether it's a lucrative industry, but it's about how do you share that wealth with the monks? How do you bring in more players to be in part of the industries? And we know we have this climate change that is now changing. So wine is not only going to be about a crop in the Western Cape. If you're looking at these areas like in KZN and the northern part of the Eastern Cape, they are presenting more opportunities. And also, it's about to say the investors that are now sitting in Stellenbosch or in Paarl, how do they go to those areas and you ensure that their investment are protected? So you bring in more guys to come in and share this wealth and become a better country. Because we cannot have a country where only 2% of the population owns 98% of the economy. I mean, we're going to end up having the likes of Kimberley everywhere in this country. And that is not sustainable, and that is not healthy. So that is basically the message we have to preach on an ongoing basis, to say, spread the wings.
To give you an idea, it takes about, only in year 5, after planting the vines, only in year 5 you harvest your first grapes. So also, it depends what market you make the wine for. And if you sell the wine for 1,000 rand a bottle or 60 rand a bottle, the input costs will also vary. So, of course, then there are other challenges as well. And because of climate change, it's becoming a reality for viticulturists. Some farms experience up to 60% crop loss this past season. So I anticipate that the wine prices will soon increase. Chardonnay specifically will be a little bit more expensive because we didn't have any Chardonnay this year in South Africa, but lots of Chenin. So those are the challenges that we are facing, and viticulturists and winemakers, we need to rethink the whole process and what we will do. Also, big cooperative sellers, of course.
Dumisani, any advice you'd like to share? You know, often when you have people are like, a father is a policeman, and he tells his kids, just whatever you do, don't become a policeman. A father is a doctor, he says, whatever you do, don't become a doctor. Father's a teacher, he says, whatever you do, don't become a teacher. How do you feel? What are you passing on to your kids? Are you saying wine is a nice industry to get in, viticulture is the thing to be, or are you quite cynical at this stage?
I think what you just said now is actually correct. Luckily for me, I don't have to tell my daughters what to be. They already know what they want to be. Definitely not winemakers. But if they want to be in business, so they didn't specify which business they want to be in. So father will be like trying to get a farm somewhere and try to plant grapes and make wine, and who knows, maybe they will end up running that business from the business perspective. And then obviously knowing how to produce it. But coming to the wine industry and the business side of it is not an easy one. Wine industry is a very tough industry to be in. The market is tough. But I mean, we've got great role models in the industry who've done it from nothing to where they are now. So it can be done, and it's also a very sophisticated product to actually make. But it requires a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work when it comes to owning land and working the soil and working those vineyards. And I was just saying that if you establish a vineyard, it actually takes you 3 to 5 years to actually have your crop, the first crop you can actually produce wine from. And if the first 3 to 5 crop is not decent crop, it's not actually enough to actually cover your cost, So to establish a vineyard costs a lot of money, as Sifiso said. So it's the guys who've got the means to do it. That's why most of the wine farm owners are actually billionaires. But you can make a business out of it. If you have a vision and you have a plan, a proper business plan, you can establish vineyards and make wine and know exactly where you want to sell it. There is a different market for it. That's why we need to encourage the whole entrepreneurship of wine. You know, we can't just be grape growers, and because that's what's been happening. We think the wine farms and wine owners and wine sellers, they know what they're doing. Some of them actually don't know. That's why most of them are so much into trouble. So we need entrepreneurs to actually come up with ideas. We need to get the product out there. I mean, South Africa is a huge country. If we can actually try and get our I mean, how much of wine that people drink in this country, just up to 20 liters per person, that we won't do that bad. We won't have to export that much.
20 liters per person per day? Or
Per year. No, per year. No.
no, because
No, we encourage a responsible enjoyment of wine. Between me and my wife, we drink a bottle a night. So, yeah, you can do the maths and see how much we consume.
yeah, I don't know if you know the Afrikaans singer Koos Kombuis. He's very well known for being drunk. So a journalist friend of mine said he went for an interview and Koos said, no, we really cut back on drinking. We drink one bottle each, my wife and I, and that's it. So, but, yeah.
But, yeah, we have a bottle each for now.
Yeah.
But we could do it more.
Is there anybody who'd like to take part in the conversation? As you see, you've got really, really well-informed individuals here with a lot of experience. And you don't feel qualified to ask questions. Well, maybe I should tell my daughter to get into winemaking, because if people ask her if she wants to become an artist, she says no, she wants to have a nice house and a good life. Right, there's a question. Will you pass the...
Hi there. I don't have a question, I have a quick story to share. This was about 1995, 1996, and I was running a consultancy with a friend of mine, and we got the option to buy Grote Zalse, plus that whole complex that's currently JC Leroux, for I think it was 12 million. But we had no money at all. So we had a 6-month option which we signed with Gilbey's. And this would have been like the big BE deal for wine, the first wine farm bought by black people. And people from Stellenbosch, you know, born in Stellenbosch, that is. So over the period of 6 months, we actually got a consortium of people together who had the money. We had a total of 16 million. And on the Sunday, before our option expired, Gilbey's gave us until the Monday to sign the final deal. We got together with our consortium at the lawyer's office, and it included a union, a private landowner, and a very well-known politician, and a couple of other people who had the 16 million. And the two of us, my friend and my partner and I, we put the whole deal together over the period of 6 months, and we negotiated with GBSA. We actually got a French chateau, De Angelis, to commit to take black winemakers to France to be trained there and then come back and to put their name on the label and sell these wines for something like 12,000 a bottle or something like that. So on that Sunday, we got together at the lawyer's office, and there was a whole consortium, and our consortium looked at us, the two gullible people, and said, where's your money? We said, we don't have money. We put the deal together. We just want a share. They said, no, goodbye. We're going to go in on our own and go to Gilbey's. So they went to Gilbey's on a Monday, and Gilbey said, but we have a deal with those two guys, not with you people with the money. Where are they? And they said, no, we kicked them out. So Gilbey said, sorry, no deal. And My partner always said afterwards, not my partner, my business partner, Howard, he died. But he always said, whenever he saw that politician on TV, he would say, om te dink ek het daai blerrie lippe gesoen.
Any comment on that?
That still happens where people of color get used for certain deals to obtain farms or specific wine labels. So that is still a reality, unfortunately. Things haven't changed since 1996.
You know the story he's talking about. So we tend to read things as if it's new. So I like understanding economic history. So if you look at the European Union, 30% of their budget is given directly to farmers to support them. And there's exactly that, to get rid of such schemes. So the rural part of the European economy, it's driven by the farmers. Even the US, they have a farm bill. And that farm bill, basically now that the US is fighting with the Chinese, and then all the farmers that are planting soya, especially because they're the biggest soya producer, the president have declared that they will get all the compensation they want. So I'm trying to get into the point of credit. And I'm trying to say perhaps we are busy talking about things that are not taking us forward, and we're not talking about the real issue. So when our leaders of this country, or of all political parties, were negotiating this democracy settlement deal we have now, they were sitting in some of these places around, and I'm sure they were drinking wine. And I think they might have missed some of the few steps that we have to actually talk about it. I mean, when you're looking in 1910, when they came up with the Union of South Africa, there were three things that these guys wanted to get rid of. They said, let's get rid of the white unemployment. They came up with the land bank in 1912. They came up with, later on, 1913, the land to distribute it. They realized that, no, the farmers but were struggling with the market. In 1936, they came up with the Marketing Act. They realized that the farmers, even themselves, while they have the market and the land, but they're unable to purchase the plant, the seeds and the fertilizers. They came up with the credit board in 1950, which I was talking about earlier. During that period of 1990 to 1992, with the CODESA period, we decided to get rid of those laws. And we came up with all these things that are actually constraining us, the country, and creating those stories that are actually making people's lives suffering. And the question is, I'm not saying that apartheid and everything else was good, but what I'm saying is there was silver lining, and there was certain policy documents that were there to get rid of some of the things. And some of those policies are actually doing well in China, are doing well recently now in Rwanda, just next to us. They're doing things that South Africans used to do. So the question is, why can't you just use that and broaden it so that everyone can benefit into it? Because truly speaking, you can't expect someone that was funded for 50 years to be competing with me who doesn't even have money to buy bread tomorrow. It's just unrealistic. And the question is, why did you then get rid of those issues that were there in place to help us do that? And that's where I keep coming back to say, maybe we're all not interested, we're just pretending to be interested in the well-being of the country, because we all know what is the issue, we all know what went wrong, just no willingness to go back to it and get it right and going. So we're creating all this chaos, and certain people are actually benefiting from this chaos.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very good point. Anybody else who would like to share a story or ask a question? No? So if we look at the... Oh, there was a question. Yeah, sure, please.
Hello. Hi. I'm just wondering, you were talking about being taken advantage of in a situation. Do you think there are people that actually will go with that situation just to get a foot in the door? Or, is it better than to say no? Or, even though you're being taken advantage of, you're still part of the group in a sense, even though you're not there for, actual empowerment. Do you think that still happens? Do you think people take the deal just to be there? And how do you combat that once you're already there?
Yeah, sure.
But I don't want to monopolize the airtime, so I'll give it to Erna to actually talk to that. But I want to give you a practical example of what's currently happening. So there's a legislation which we run, which is called statutory measures. It came in around 1997, which basically provide oxygen to wine industry and other industries. So per annum, the wine industry raises through that policy, they raises about, I think it's in the region of 112 to 113 million rand. 61 million rand of that, it's supposed to help cases like what is shared now, and supposed to help that empowerment you're talking about, my sister. But now, when I come as a policymaker and then I ask, you have about roughly 90,000 hectares in the wine industry, and then I ask a very simple question: how much of that has helped people of color, like the color of wine, to actually gain hectares? And you're unable to get the answer onto that. But when you're asking of how the money was spent, you will get a very good report. So then it goes back to question to say, we are making these deals and we are actually taking people that are unable to understand, first of all, what kind of deal they're entering to. And secondly, we tend to focus on training and training and training. I once made an example to say, how do you train a winemaker that graduated from Stellenbosch and is actually trained by another winemaker who graduated with him in the very same university, but just the difference between the two of them, the other one is white, the other one is black. And to me, that doesn't make sense. And you realize the very simple money that could have been used to change that difference, it's actually using those things that doesn't take us any further. So those are just some of the stories I can share. But having said that, I don't want to sound too negative. There are projects that are actually doing very well, like the one that she was mentioning, I think the Adams, and there are a couple of them that are actually doing well and they are changing the landscape. And we should compliment those ones. But the majority of them are taking us backwards.
Anybody else would like to comment or ask a question? I think if we go back to the documentary, then there seems to be like three elements, right? The one is training that we talk about, and the other one is access, and the other one is land. And those are and then it seems to me, is land the most difficult one to solve, or would you disagree?
I think indeed it is. I think there are a number of other things that we should first address. And I don't think that it should only be the responsibility of government to assist. I think the private sector should also take responsibility. We should think of strategies to work on new methods. And also, like Sifiso mentioned, Rwanda. Some of our neighboring countries, they're using Tanzania. They're also using some very, very good models in terms of agriculture. And to make it accessible to everyone, and to get rid of the inequality. I think if we focus on that, then we can work on the other things. That's my opinion.
Yeah, as you said, education used to be the key, but now the locks have been changed. So, yeah. So if you don't do something about the locks, yeah, that's not going to help. Sorry, were you seeing a question there? No. Oh, no. Very often, if you have a meeting or you took part in something, you go home and you think, damn, I should have said that. Did you who are part of the documentary, have you watched it with friends, family, colleagues, loved ones and thought, why didn't they put that in, or why didn't they say that? Because I went to the Q&A at the Durban International Film Festival, and there were quite a lot of questions to Akin Omotoso about, like, so why didn't you do more about the dopstelsel? Why didn't you really go into the land issue? And why did you show us American wine connoisseurs? Is that an important part of the story? If you look back on it now, do you feel like this should have been part of the story. We should have added like 10 minutes longer. What would you have wanted to add?
Well, for me, I think I mentioned earlier it was a combination of everything. I think it's almost like having a wound that closed and then it was open. I think I said what I wanted to, but it wasn't about me. It was about all the four others. I was just there from a university side. I think it's important to raise those questions. What about the dorpstelsel? DOP system, land, those are critical issues that we need to talk about. And I think if we have more forums like this where people can talk about the elephant in the room, that's one of the ways that we will solve the big problem. But for me, there wasn't anything in particular that I wanted to add. Of course, there's also a limitation in terms of time. So, yeah.
You, Dumisani?
DOP system, yes, there was a mention about DOP system, but it didn't go into depth. Because I remember we'll have issues at work, and then the drinking is a problem in the Western Cape. Not just in the Western Cape, our country has a drinking problem. So DOP system does have it did play a role in what is happening in our country. So we had issues where people won't pitch to work on Mondays or stuff like that. And then we can't always penalize people, but we have to help them out to get out of that whole hangover from the DOP system, like one of the guys used to say, and other people say it's an excuse. But unfortunately, there was a DOP system, and we have to deal with that, and we can't shy away from it. But the documentary, I think they tried to cover as much as they could. It was a first documentary, it was the first chapter that we need to open about the wine industry as where it's coming from and where it's going. It's not the end. I mean, we can indulge more into more topics that should have been dealt with in depth. Obvious, DOP system is one of those, and it's not in isolation. There's more that that should be taken further and be investigated, or to be talked more about. Now we know about the first few people of color who started winemaking. Now we know about that. Now, where to from there? Where are they going? Are they starting their own businesses? Are they into a cooperation? Are they into partnership with other business people in establishing their own farms, in creating a culture that we need to create in our back home where we come from? Because where I come from, people, we only drank all those cheap wines or your Pele wines. But now when I go home, people say, you must bring us wine. And we don't want just any wine, we want the Stellenbosch wine, because we know the Stellenbosch is the capital of wine, of proper winemaking. And we need to educate more. And I've got a friend of mine here who's here, Manzi. She's in a project of teaching senior students, people that are about to graduate, that are going to go out there and be lawyers, accountants, to know the culture of dining and wine. So, I mean, we were saying to these guys, you're going to be in boards. You're going to be in a board meeting, and you're going to go out and make decisions, and they're going to be made somewhere in a golf course or in a restaurant with a glass of wine. So you can't go there and be intimidated by environment. You need to know and understand the culture of doing business. And you live in Stellenbosch, and you are exposed to these wine farms. You get free access to these wine farms. You say, I'm a Stellenbosch student. I would like to taste in a wine farm and learn more about your product, and actually take that knowledge out there to their colleagues who go to university or wherever, that are not exposed to the wine and the dining and the sophistication of the product. So, I mean, the journey was started, but it doesn't end there. We have to take it further, and we need to open up more, not just by how we were treated and how the issues we went through when we were in Stellenbosch, but where do we take it forward? But I think the country has come very far to try and integrate. And I take my hat off for those winemakers who were the first ones to work with qualified winemakers just like them, as Sifiso said, went through the same system. And that respect of knowing and trusting that they can actually trust you, that you have the capacity to actually do the things that they wanted you to do. Because to get those jobs, you have to have the technical knowledge of how to handle situations. And that was, for me, it was a great start. Education. We have to fix our education. We need to get our schools geared up to what the fourth industrial revolution is about. And we need to educate and share and open up our doors and share experiences.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for sharing. Sifiso, some last words from you. A final toast.
Thanks. I think it's nice to be with the celebrities because they are in the movie. We are the fans. So I can say to my celebrities what I want to say. But I think if you watch the movie, it makes a very strong message to say, on the educational side of issues, we have progressed very well. In actual fact, we should be proud to say, through such difficult times, we have such heroes that have managed to conquer those difficulties, and they are a good example to it. The next thing is to then say, as you rightfully said, land is a very difficult and emotional issue, but unfortunately it's an issue that we have to deal with it. We have no way another. We have to deal with that. The second thing that I think maybe the movie, the next time, the next sequel of the movie will talk about, to say, what kind of the industry of wine we envisage. And within that imaginary or the dreamed kind of industry, who should play what kind of role? Because there's two ways of looking at these things. You have an existing pie, you can cut it to the pieces. And I can tell you right now, there won't be enough pieces to service everyone. Or you can grow the pie, but ensure each and every person gets its own pie and understand exactly what kind of benefits they will get. And I think that's one of the things I think we need to be very honest. We were not there in the early 90s when some of these things were decided. But surely we owe it to the next generation to say the status quo can continue, but also it can't be done in an emotional way. It has to be done in an orderly way, that the next generation that we're borrowing this country can be proud of ourselves to say, guys, we adopted something good that you have done. And that starts by all of us to be honest with each other and say it as it is. And we have to go that route.
Guys, thank you very much for saying it as it is and for coming out today. Thank you, everybody, for chatting along. And yeah, I hope you are going to have a fantastic time at the festival.
Thank you.
Thank you.